Dr. Fatah, you start.
The next
Okay.
slide.
Welcome all to this event of Region 10 Talk. We call it R10 Talk. Today we are presenting a very timely webinar on tackling global environmental challenges to achieve sustainable development goals. Our honorable speakers today, Dr. Mushtaq Ahmed Memon, Regional Coordinator for Chemicals and Pollution Action Sub-Program, United Nations Environment Program, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. So
You just explain a little bit about that and then you invite Dr. Zia.
yes, so we are now at the era where climate change is having a very serious issue all over the world. Each and every moment, pollution is occurring from many different sources. Carbon pollution is one of the main issue that is harming our environment, that is a great threat for our environment. So saving our environment is one of the prime issues in day-to-day life. As an engineer or as a practitioner, every aspect of life, we have to be very much careful and concerned about environmental pollution, about our climate change, and we have to take measure how we can save our society, save the whole world. Considering this timely issue, so we are, Region 10 is regularly organizing R10 Talk. In particular, this is Region 10 initiative, this R10 Talk, what we'll be having today. So at the very beginning, I welcome Zia Ahmed, our Vice Chair of Professional Activities of IEEE Region 10, a very experienced volunteer as well as professional who will be delivering the welcome address for today's R10 Talk. Sir, Zia sir, the floor is now yours.
So you are muted, Dr. Zia.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Sheikh Fatah. It's really an honor and pleasure for me to welcome everyone to this webinar, and especially very welcome to our speaker who will be talking about a very important topic. IEEE really has given it a lot of importance to climate change and the emerging challenges because of climate change. Last year, IEEE President Professor Saifur Rahman put the climate change on a very high priority for IEEE to look into this, and Region 10 responded by forming an ad hoc committee to look into um, possible solutions for management of changes or the consequences of changes with the climate. So climate change has been our focus. Um, uh, what we can do about communities, how to deal with this issue. And today we have a very eminent speaker to talk on this topic, Dr. Mushtaq Ahmed Memon. Dr. Memon is a regional coordinator for Chemical and Pollution Program, which is a sub-program of United Nations Environmental Program. So he's in the Asia Pacific region office, and he has been involved with work related to circular economy, sustainable consumption and production, plastic pollution, air pollution, waste and water management. So all these things which are very important for our climate change, how these things impact climate change and also our environment. So it's really a great topic for us to talk about. Dr. Memon holds a PhD degree in environmental economy from Japan and a master's degree in project management. He has published papers in international journals, and he has been a participant in major events related to United Nations sub-program on chemical and pollution. He also conducts training, so probably we'll ask him again to come back, and or we will try to explore with him what training programs from IEEE Region 10 we can uh, you know, organize, because it will be really nice training for our volunteers as well. Who in Region 10 there are several committees which try to relate their program with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So really, it's a great thing to get in touch with Dr. Memon. So without taking more time, I would like to invite Dr. Memon to deliver his talk through Sheikh Fatah. So Professor Sheikh Fatah, back to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for enlightening us with your brief talk. So now, without further delay, it's time to have our today's keynote speaker, Dr. Mushtaq Ahmed Memon, who will be delivering a very timely topic, tackling global environmental challenges to achieve sustainable development goals. Sir, we cordially invite you to start your keynote session.
Thank you, and good morning and good afternoon. And so thank you for inviting me for this talk. And I'm sharing my screen first. I hope all of you can see my screen. And I want to make a first sort of perspective for this presentation, because the topic is very wide. So my perspective today will be more to look at as the universities, or because most of you belong to universities, and then how universities can help or come together to get this challenge of sustainable development goals, which we are lagging behind, resolved. And also then, in addition to that, there are now new goals are coming up in different ways. Suppose climate change COP establishing, let's say, the phasing out of fossil fuels, moving to the renewable energy, for example. Then these plastic negotiations are underway for the new treaty. Then the other treaties, including the biodiversity or global framework of biodiversity is in place, a global framework of chemicals is in place. And we all know, like chemicals in electronics, chemicals in plastics, and so on. So basically, looking at those international scenario where we have to aim to achieve those targets, how universities or the professors, researchers, young professionals can come together to do that. So I will try to put my perspective in that way, and start with a sort of a background that when we are talking about the sustainable development goals, then we have now 2030 as the end date for this, and before 2015 we had a millennium development goals, and again most of the goals could not achieve, and even now we are quite lagging behind and all this. So there's a lot of effort, and if you see that what type of effort is needed, for example, the policies are needed, for example, the technologies are needed, for example, the finance is needed, for example, the behavior changes are needed, for example, the equity issues with the gender in the context of the vulnerable classes and so on, that is needed. So there are various aspects which are needed to be pushed to get or achieve these goals. So whether it be the goals about poverty, hunger, health, water, life over the land, life below the sea, and so on, or climate action, so forth. So, but most of these ingredients, what are needed are like, as I mentioned, technologies, policies, financing, behavioral changes, equity, and so on. So this is how we need to understand where we can bring our contributions, whether we are a professor, whether we are a researcher, whether we are private sector, whether we are a policymaker, and so on. So when we talk about this achieving the goals, the one way to look at this is the circular economy model. Because when we say the circular economy, that means we need to align the input-output ratios. So for example, any economy, whether you say agriculture economy, you need an input like you need a water, you need a fertilizer, seeds, soil, and so on. If you're talking about the manufacturing economy, again, you need a steel or raw materials, you need energy and so forth, water, and so on. And again, if you're talking about the construction economy and so on, again, you need the inputs like all the materials and everything. And then output in terms of one is a productive output, let's say vehicles out of a manufacturing plants is coming out, or the food from the agriculture fields is coming out, or the buildings. But on the other hand, there are also the additional negative impacts which are coming out. For example, air pollution, water pollution, antimicrobial resistance, and soil contamination and plastic pollution, and you name it. So basically, the important point is that how we reduce the negative impacts of this economic growth in any sector, and how we can really also create the bigger impact of so whether the food is coming out, but whether it is coming to help the equity, it's coming to help the gender issues, it's coming to help the poverty. So also that is another angle we look into that. So this is how we aim for SDGs. Now, putting this perspective of IEEE in the SDGs, where we can really look for their contributions, is that goal 6 for clean water and sanitation, for example, or the clean energy, for example, or that including the transition to the renewable energy, sustainable cities, goal 12, responsible consumption and production, then climate action, life below water, life on land. And then also there's a lot of goals that IEEE can help in a way, is also aiming for poverty, hunger, health, decent work, industry innovations, reducing inequalities, peace, and partnerships. So basically, there are always entry points for all the goals from IEEE to help. But as I mentioned that today, my focus is more coming to the looking at the IEEE's role in the knowledge economy, which is really, really important, because as I mentioned that the prerequisites or the enabling environment requires the policies, new technologies, innovations, financing, business models, behavior changes, and so on. So in this context, we have to create the knowledge economy. That means the human resources which are going to help. As I say, whether it be the policy making is also human resources, like a human activity, whether it be the new technologies, innovations, or operation of technologies, again, a human resources required, same with the financing and behavior changes and so on. So how we can bring this knowledge economy with your help, that is the key goal for us. And before coming to how we need to understand the importance of a knowledge or knowledge-based economy, for example. As we have seen the many countries like Japan, Korea, or many other countries, even now China, India, and so on, they are really increasing rapidly on this knowledge-based economy. And if you look at their institutions and where the researchers, professionals are coming out, on the one hand, they are trained for the new technologies, new policy-making processes, new financing or business models, and so on. But on the other hand, they are also creating additional momentum by coming together through different groups. As I say, this R10 is also one of the groups in that way. So how you can really help that? And the GDP that is based on the knowledge economy has usually the lowest negative environmental impacts. As I mentioned, agriculture economies or manufacturing economies have a higher negative environmental impacts vis-a-vis the knowledge-based economies. So if you look also on the knowledge-based economies, they help to achieve the Human Development Index, as whether it be the access to the health, access to the water, access to the education, quality of life, and all that. So basically, knowledge-based economies can help better than the agriculture or manufacturing economies to achieve Human Development Index. Now, this knowledge economy, in the context of the current SDGs or the decarbonization, renewable energy, when we put this together, we come with a new term which is called the green skills. Now, these green skills are required to achieve the environmental aspects of the sustainable development. And International Labour Organization, they have like a definition of a green jobs, not only the decent jobs, but they help to improve the environmental issues like energy and raw material efficiency and so on, ecosystems and so forth. So basically, this green skills is a very important term, as we see the green jobs is becoming a new norm in creating a demand. So if you look on even the job fairs in the universities, where let's say major companies, whether it be the manufacturing companies, whether it be the service companies and so on, they come for the headhunting. Then nowadays they are putting their own goals. For example, many beverage companies, drinks, they come and mention that they will have 100% recyclable packaging. That means to achieve that 100% recyclable packaging, they need new technologies, new skill sets, and so on. For example, a company would come and tell that either their operations will be now over to the renewable energy in next 5 years, 100%, or they will be coming with the new products to promote the renewable energy, like solar panels, windmills, and so on, for example. Then the companies may come up with mentioning that this food which we are bringing in the market will have the lowest food loss during transportation and lowest food waste and chemical free, for example. So again, they will need human resources to develop the technologies, implement the technologies, as well as the policies and so on, including even, let's say, mobile apps for shared economy and demand and supply and so forth. So basically, this green skills is becoming a very, very important aspect. Now, what shift green skills or green jobs can bring? Now, if you look at this slide, you can see that Asia Pacific in the center, where 50% and 32% you might pick directly there, no? So that means 50% of global resources we are using in Asia Pacific, while we are only contributing 32% towards the global GDP, which means we are very inefficiently using that. That means our technologies are inefficient, or our operations are inefficient, and so on. And if you look then further down, there is a $1, you might see the sign. So this is also a lot of disparity within Asia Pacific. So for example, in Japan, is 0.025 kilogram of the raw materials are needed to increase the additional $1 in the GDP, while in Mongolia, which is based on the mining, we need more than 15 kilogram. So also this disparity is a major challenge, and that means if we increase the per kilogram for $1, that means we are wasting or we are creating more negative environmental impact. As I mentioned, that if a knowledge economy, which may need a very low resources in a way, can create more. So this is how the shift could be done, and that's where again the green skills and green job will help. Now, giving you the targets, if you look at the Asia Pacific region, our middle income is increasing rapidly, and our urban population is increasing rapidly due to migration, due to the industries and jobs. Now, the impact of this middle income and urban population is mass consumerism. If you see that, how often now we start changing, let's say, our phones, how often we want to use the single-use plastics, how often we want to order the food, online commerce, and so on. So basically, this mass consumerism has increased a lot of negative environmental impacts. While the quality of life, it has improved, but it is now being affected by all this pollution in the water, pollution in the air, pollution in the soil, and so on, including AMR and so forth. So this is a major challenge which we are creating a vicious circle here. Now, to break this vicious circle, we have to aim for moving from mass consumption to the sound material or circular economy, as I mentioned earlier, that where we reduce the negative environmental impacts of all our economic activities by being efficient, by being recovering all the waste and bringing back into the economic cycles and so on. So this is where we need to have our green skills and green jobs aimed. Now, how our identify that what type of jobs do we need, for example, even if this is called the green jobs. So you look at the life cycle analysis of any product, any goods, and here I have put a plastics. So for plastics, if in the front row, you will see that the extraction of the primary resources to produce the polymers, and then polymers to produce products, and products going to the consumers. And there are some major consumers like beverages or other companies who use for packaging. Some are the direct consumers like us. And then from consumption, it goes to the end of life and final waste. Now, if you look at the linear model, there's a lot of waste as we see today that plastics are creating. And if we want to make this circular, that means on the one hand, we ensure that our technologies are efficient for production, our polymers are toxic-free and they can last longer, and our products are no more single-use products, they are multiple and their shelf life is much longer, and then their end of life is going back to the system, whether we upscaling, recycling, remanufacturing, and so on. So to do so, what we need then on the left side, we need to understand the current situation, benchmarking. Then we need to bring the enabling environment like the policies and regulations. And then we need to also bring in the financing, because if we want to have a new technologies, new ways, we need initial financing and so on till it sustain the new businesses and so on. Then also the new technologies and business models, but most important is our behavior change. Because when we get used to with the single-use plastics, even as I mentioned that in hotels, we don't use many times those daily toothbrushes and so on, and we throw back. So this is where the challenge is. But at some single use are very important, like healthcare, like syringes. And so we cannot avoid all the single use, but we have to properly manage the single use as well. So this is where the social behaviors are very, very important. And then we have different actors in the system for this, for example, from the waste generators, which we all are, governments for policy making, the regulators, the private sector, which are the producers of the polymers, and also the managing the final waste and so on, civil society and so forth. So again, if you look at this, all this three-dimensional phenomena, you will easily find that what type of jobs, whether it be in economics, whether it be in the engineering, whether it be in the law, environmental law policies, whether it be in the environment education, there are lots of green jobs and green skills required to achieve this zero plastic pollution per se. So similarly, you can put any product, any service into this model, and you can see that how our needs are. And also, if you look at the life cycle from the eco design to the green supply chains, sharing platforms like this Grab and Uber and so on, or the co-working spaces, we're talking about the extent product life and product use instead of single use, product as a service. So instead of selling the bulbs, many companies are selling the lights, for example, so they can control all the e-waste and so on, and then green recycling and recovery. So you can imagine how many new skills, new jobs are required into this. And then also when we see the growing role of the modern technologies, whether it be the digital technologies like mobile apps, cloud computing, and social like networks and so on, to the hybrid, into the robotics and 3D printing, to the conventional engineering, again, all this like requiring the new skills and new jobs. So how you develop the strategy for the skills development? So again, you have to have a market review, like in 10 years, as I mentioned, this job fairs by many companies come to show their 10-year plans, and they identify what job shift is coming in their companies. So at the national level also, because we are also at the national like economic growth targets, we are also part of the many international treaties, for example. So we have to understand our national targets, our many private companies targets, our civil society targets, and so on, to understand what new skills would be required, what new jobs will be there. And then we also see that what is now currently available, like many universities are producing many graduates, whether they are fit to this new jobs situation, or there's a gap, demand and supply gap. And then also as a stakeholder, like you as a professor, you as a researcher, you even as a private investor and so on, what would be your role in really filling this gap of the green skills to match the demand side? And then you develop the roadmap and detailed action plan to achieve that. To do so, one way also is to look at the historical evidences that how the job market changes. And so when we talk about this environmental issues, and from 1713 to coming down to the today, we have seen so many international agreements on different aspects, whether it be the forests, whether it be the lakes, rivers, whether it be the pollution, whether it be the GHGs and so on. So you can see how the shift has happened over the years, and that means that the new jobs were being created all over those years, and people who are now the climate like finance, who are doing the climate technologies, they had to learn those things to fill this demand side of those jobs. Similarly, if you look at the multilateral environmental agreements, whether it be the Basel Convention, Stockholm, Minamata, whether it be the biodiversity, whether it be the chemicals framework, and so on, so you can again see that those frameworks or implementation of those MEAs would require new skill sets from policy angle, from technology, from financing, from behavior change, and so on. Similarly, as you might have heard about environmental social governance investments, now all the companies are moving to that, where they are really creating a new ways of managing their companies, new products in the line, for example. And so to do so, again, they need a lot of new human resources, or they need to transitioning to the new green skills of their current human resources and so on. So again, when we talk about the climate change, our race to net zero, as we see the many countries are coming with the new targets, the 2060, 2050, for renewable energy, for transition in the energy and so on, then you can look at this again, that to achieve those targets, we will need new skills in every field, including policies, technologies, financing, and so on. So this has been very important to look into the historical transitions to see how the milestones are being set and whether we are producing the sufficient human capital, human resources for that or not. And as also I mentioned about this plastic treaty being discussed and negotiated, once the targets are set by the member states, again, they will need a lot of new human resources and so on. And also learning from the conventional job market transitions, as we know that most of times, the many countries had an agriculture economy. Then they moved to the manufacturing, then they moved to the service economy and so on. So that shift required the new jobs and so on. And this is very important to look at that. And especially when we are talking about the sustainable development goals, it's more of interdisciplinary jobs, like where we have economy, society, and environment working together. So these are some of the examples I'm bringing. Suppose this is about the sustainable food production. So sustainable food production means our chemicals in food. AMR, antimicrobial resistance out of the food industry and animal industry and so on, for example. Air pollution, open burning issues, plastic packaging in the food systems and so on. So there are huge challenges to really call it sustainable food production, and that's where those new jobs are required for that. And supply side, as I mentioned, that universities are at the core, then there are many other training centers and all that, and on-job trainings and so forth, that is where there. So this is hypothetical, like I created to see that the way the international treaties, the situation, SDGs, everything, there's a huge gap in the skills and these green jobs, where we can really look at the current universities, curriculums, and their training and laboratories and so on. So to fill this gap, we really need to push ourselves or our universities or our training centers to make this happen. And then to do so, we need to have a lot of consultations. It can't be done like sitting in the room or drawing rooms or on the computer. It needs more really in the field, to talking to the different ministries, talking to the universities, talking to the private sector and so on. And that's where we need to really put in focus the governance of the universities, as well as the people, the value chain across the universities and so on. And then we need to develop a detailed action plan that how this like a transition in the new, because like if I remember correctly, just to give you an example, like many years back, sometimes I used to give lectures in Japan when I was there for 20 years. So in Yokohama National University, they used to have a shipbuilding engineering, very famous. But then Japan like lost the shipbuilding to the Korea and China, and the Yokohama National University, they moved to the new like field. And that's where, again, they need a lot of professors shift there to help that. So this is very important. Unless you have a proper action plan, it's going to be a lot of challenges for the universities to move there. So again, for this reason, we need to have a proper reporting for these targets and corporate targets and roadmap and suggestions. And then also for the universities to attract them to transition. And we need to bring the job markets to universities. And we need to get the investments from those job markets to fill the or upskill their skills of their teaching staff, their laboratories, and so on there. So this is what there are many like calling it a degree reset as well, like still looking at the Harvard, looking at the different universities. And again, as I mentioned, that Republic of Korea is a very good example of a knowledge economy. That's how they induce the universities and knowledge and so on. And this is where the growth of those countries is now rapid, where the knowledge economy is there. So basically, at the last, I'm going to say that this Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers can play a significant role, because now if you look in, even in the vehicles, like, it used to be 85% mechanical and 15% electronics. Now it's reverse. Now it's almost 70% plus is electronics and only 30% is mechanical. And also, there's a lot of shift in anything, even civil engineering, which I did myself. Like now, all the equipment, everything requires electronics and electrical appliances to even do my job as a civil engineer, for example. So this is very important, and IEEE can really, really play a very important role into this, helping the universities to bridge the gap for the green skills and green jobs. And in that way, they can help to achieve the SDGs, as I mentioned, about the energy, about the water, about the sustainable cities, the climate action, and so on. So I would like to stop here, but then it's good to have more discussions, and I will stop sharing so I can see all of you as well. Thank you.
Dr. Memon, it's really fascinating what you are talking about. It's really very eye-opening things, how many things are involved, the scope of the issue and challenges there. This green jobs and green skills is really something where IEEE should be, I believe, should be focusing, because these are the future generation who will be going for these green jobs. So I was wondering how at IEEE or at Region 10 we can align ourselves with your SDG 7, 9, 11, and 13. Uh, are there any particular ways in which we can approach you? And in last year, we organized some training for young people to understand and the key technical technical issues with climate change. But I think we need to do more.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, based on our like work or experiences, there are various ways. So, for example, one is that like we organize sometimes or help our partners to organize summer or winter schools. So it's more like a crash course into the some of the particular ways, as I mentioned, that how this shift. So first is to shift in the mindset that how we can, let's say, reduce the negative impacts of any electrical and electronic appliances. For example, like I work a lot on the e-waste, for example. And suppose in e-waste also there are other issues. Suppose the cooling appliances, they have HFCs and CFCs as well. So when you look at this understanding, this is very, very important for everyone to go through those like crash courses to shift the mindset to really understand the perspective of anything. As I say, EVs, for example, electric vehicles now is a lot of rapid like growth, but then also it's creating a lot of challenges, because if you look at the heavy batteries and so on, so on the one hand, the life cycle of the batteries itself, including rare earths and so forth, but on the other hand, because of that, the braking, like microplastics from the wheels and like brakes and so on, that is also creating issue. And then also with the shared economy, unless like Singapore, you are controlling the number of the cars on the road, the number is increasing and again creating congestion and the pollution and a lot of challenges. So I think this is very important to bring that summer schools to make it really understand that. And number two, as I say, you can help the universities to understand the future jobs in next 10 years and 15 years and understand what additional curriculum or the shift in the curriculum or additional degrees or degree resets they would require. So we can help you to develop some programs and so on to do so. Over.
So I will really encourage Professor Sheikh Fatah to explore these things, and maybe we should invite our chairs from humanitarian technology, women in engineering, and student activities to have a discussion with Dr. Memon to explore all these things where we can start some activities or mold our current activities to focus on these things, because it seems like a green skills for our student community, young professional is an area where we need to put some efforts. So Sheikh Fatah, please continue to have a dialogue with Dr. Memon and see what we can do.
Sure, it's thank you, Professor GSR. So really, it's a very good and burning issue, like how we'll prepare our next generation or current generation, how the courses should be adopted as quickly as possible. In fact, universities are also taking care of that, as well as the national policy level pressure is coming to each and every organization now. So the thrust is coming from organization. We have to change it. So how you can help it? Our respected speaker rightly pointed out, even in civil engineering or mechanical, it doesn't matter. Everywhere there is a big shift. Everywhere, every moment, people, we are now thinking. So I will take a chance to ask you a couple of questions or clarification. First of all, the green skill that you mentioned and explained in detail about the green skills. So if I prioritize among them, maybe, so considering the carbon reduction, carbon footprint reduction. So what's your opinion that this AI and digital technology, how this can play an important role in reducing overall environmental bad effect? So the current world is moving towards AI and all digital technologies.
Okay. So let's start with artificial intelligence and digital technologies. Okay. First of all, when we say that helping the climate action or the climate change, then our main goal is that either we have a mitigation like a greenhouse gas emissions reduction, for example, or we have adaptation, for example, like adopt new crops or the new buildings way that we can like sustain the life with the heating and so on. So depending on either side, mitigation or adaptation side of the climate change, the role of artificial intelligence first is that how efficiently we can do. Because basically, whenever we computing when came in place, it was more efficient or calculators than humans could do, for example. But again, they can't though now there are self-learning models in AI and digital technologies, but still there's a lot of a debate that is not yet there, that is still they need a human guidance to implement those models and so forth. So there is a need for AI and digital technologies first for the efficiency. That word is very, very important. Number two, also, they are very good to bring the cross learning, because cross learning, like suppose, let's say we want to develop the policy on the extended producer responsibility for the computing equipment, because otherwise it will go in the waste, it will create a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of good materials, metals there. So basically, we want to have a producer role. Like suppose, as I say, in Japan, when we are throwing anything, we have to pay. And then also the producer has to combine the pay and to recycle that. So again, this cross-learning is very comparatively efficient if we use artificial intelligence. Then also the analysis of the future job markets. There's a lot of data that is happening and all that. So this metadata analysis and so forth. So again, that's where artificial intelligence and can help a lot to understand the job markets and so forth, or even helping to identify different curriculums and so forth. So there are different ways to deploy AI and digital technologies for meeting or achieving SDGs or developing the new job markets, which we call the green jobs. Over.
Excellent 2 points you pointed out. Yes, the efficiency as well as the cross learning. Yeah, really, I like that. So I hope our participants audience really will agree with that. The efficiency AI can make more and more efficient, and the cross learning. I really appreciate that. Just another short clarification. You said that the race to net zero. Yes. So we are in region 10, but especially if we look at European countries as well as North America, there is a very, very competitive race, I should say, about the net zero. So from your perspective, your experience, especially considering the region 10, the race towards net zero, if I compare with the resiliency of our grid and the overall system, on top of this adaptation process, as you rightly pointed out, the mitigation and then adaptation, and the third one is resilience. So we have to face a lot of natural calamities in our region 10, all over the countries, like the flood, cyclones, earthquakes. It's a very regular phenomenon. Looking to that perspective, racing towards net zero, in contrast, resiliency in the overall grid. How we will compare that?
Okay, first let me give an empirical example before theory. So as I mentioned, I lived in Japan 20 years, and Japan has I would say, one of the highest rates of the natural disasters. whether it be the earthquakes, whether it be the typhoons, and so on. And Japan has a very less natural resources as well. And so it relies more on the imports, whether it be the oil, whether it be the steel like iron ore, and so on. So if you look at the Japan's this 2050 net zero race, and they are trying to, and even unfortunately in 2011, when I was there, this Fukushima disaster, so even that nuclear option is no more that much favorable as it used to be in that times now. Now, suppose they are trying very hard to go to the green hydrogen. And so to get the green hydrogen and or get to this energy is one important. But then also, if you look at the Japan, they also race to come to the efficiency, whether it be the mileage like of the cars for say, so even their hybrid engines and so forth, or whether be their like efficiency or reduced use of energy, the way they're housing, their all that. So on the one hand, they created the resilience or against those earthquakes and so on. If you look at any like damage, whether be to the human lives or to the materials, is minimum in comparison to the earthquakes of same scale if that happens in other places. No, so we have an empirical like example in the region like that is there. But now coming to the theoretical part, that when we have to achieve all this, if you look at the shift, suppose again in Japan, from the elementary schools, they are taught the environment education. They are taught the impacts of the plastic pollution, the impacts of water pollution, air pollution, because Japan, when they start the industrialization in 1950s and 60s, it was heavily polluted country in the world. And there were a lot of asthma, the diseases and cancer and everything was there. But then they rapidly started this environment education. And now if you see that those children who were taught in the schools in 1970s, they are retired and they are the senior volunteers even to do that. So on the one hand, that behavior was shifted, but then they have increased human resources to do the more voluntary effort and so on. So the theoretical point here is that if we can create a shift in our environment education, that can really, really help towards resilience, adaptation, and mitigation. And to create that shift, again, we need to look at our curriculums and looking at the teaching methodologies and so on. Over.
Thank you. I like your example. Like, yeah, we have to, we don't need only to consider efficient building energy management. We also have to consider what you said, like the building has to be also resilient. I mean, the construction and those height and other issues. So it's a both way, like you rightly pointed out about the transportation sector also, not only the efficiency as well as how we can tackle the resiliency. So I think we are almost running out of time. So Prakashji, you had a question on the chat box.
Yeah, I have a very simple question.
Yeah, sure.
Just ask the Dr. Memon, because he talked very well about all these, sustainable developments. Just very simple, what incentives, say for example, in a country like Pakistan, because my questions mostly relevant to those Pakistan, or you can say the developing countries. What incentives can business and industries employ to promote these sustainable activities? Because it's very difficult, the organizations or industry, to go for these sustainable development goals or promote those sustainable practices.
Okay, and I will also combine the question from Nirmala ji, and she's my very good friend based in UK now. So, okay, so in the chat, Raisa. Okay, so for Professor Prakash, see, I mean, private sector will not do anything on their own. It's historically there is a corporate sector. They want to maximize their profits. They have their shareholders and everything there. So that's why the role of governments become very, very important through the policy making, the regulatory bodies and so on, to come in place to really enforce. However, there's a difference. Now, as many people ask that why the policies and rules do not work in our country, like let's say for private sector or even for us, like in Singapore, it's heavily fine if you throw any garbage or littering the street, because they are keeping an eye. So it's policing. And it's also not possible in our countries to that level of policing, that one, enforcement. It's literally impossible. So if you look on some countries, again, Japan, my favorite country to look, when there's a red, signal is red for walking, people, most of times they stop. They don't cross the road. And only they cross the green. Even there's no police watching at them and so on. So this is a behavior that comes from the, as I say, environment education. So even the private companies, the CEOs and everything who are having if you look at their previous education from the lifestyles or the parents or that, you will find many, suppose Bill Gates, for example. Now Bill Gates' children, if you look at that, how they are being trained. So they are not like a consumer society per se, or caring. They care. And that's why Gates Foundation puts a lot of money into that. So this is very important. As I mentioned, that environment education is the key, is the behavior changes, how the societies can help to grow together. So this is what we are lacking. So even we have a good policies, even if we have this private sector there, unless that private sector's pressures and all that also comes from the people who are grew up in a with the proper environment education, with a care for the duty or care for the society and so on. Now for Nirmalaji, on the waste electrical and electronic equipment, as again, this is the same issue with the enforcement, because a lot of our earnings, and that's why this plastic recycling or many electronic recycling is not a profitable business. Why it is profitable in our part of the world? Because we create externalities. We don't pay for that. We create air pollution. We create the plastic pollution. We create the metal pollution, heavy metals, and so on. So basically, if we start doing proper recycling, it's very expensive business. There's no profit into that. That's why in Japan, for example, as you know, that if I need to throw my refrigerator, I pay 5,000 yen, company pays, and transportation costs. So then it might become economically break even for recycling. Otherwise, recycling, the way we do, is not profitable, because we only earn by either not paying for the externalities or not paying the taxes and so on. So this is very important. That's why to have a closed loop recycling with the proper extended producer responsibility and polluter pay principle. So if I'm throwing anything, I also need to pay for that. So this is what is really important for that. Over.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the question in the chat box is very similar to this waste electrical and electronic equipment management.
So, yeah, that I already replied, because that's from Nirmalaji. Yeah.
Exactly. So I can see Agnes, you are here. So if you have any quick question.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Atta. And thank you for your excellent presentation, Dr. Memon. And what you just shared is in line with IEEE commitment to advancing technology for humanity. I'm keen to understand the intersections of economic policy and sustainable development goal mitigations. And if you wouldn't mind, could you please elaborate on the specific economic strategic and policy instrument that you consider most effective in addressing a sustainable development goal? And furthermore, I would be interested to hear your thought on how this strategy may be implemented in both developed and developing countries, considering their unique economic and social context, I think. And thank you for your insight and contribution for this critical issue.
Thank you. And okay, let me start again with example. Like SDG 12, which is a responsible consumption and production, which is the only goal where my organization, UNEP, is the lead. And so I do a lot of work on that. And in the 12.3 target, which is on the food loss and food waste. Food loss is with the FAO and food waste with the UNEP. So now, when we talk about this sustainable food systems, on the one hand, the big picture, that how much food is produced in the world is more than sufficient to fill the requirements of all the world population. So why it is no food for many people? Because a lot of food is wasted, lost, and so on. So how you develop the models or the economic instruments that on the one hand, the food loss and food waste is reduced. So if there is a proper, as I say, polluter pay principle, let's say, if the proper policy is economic instrument that you are heavy fines, again, give you example in Macau, which is famous for the tourism, hotels, and all casinos. So I was called in to help them to manage the food waste. Now, Macau is a small island. They cannot even have a place to store the waste and so on. And to attract the customers, they provide many times free food, and even the energies are subsidized and so on. Now, the challenge was that because of that, many people waste a lot of food, and also is in a cultural, you leave the food in the plates and so on. So my suggestion was that you can charge less for food, no problem, or even provide free food. But anything left in the plate, you charge heavily. So in this way, you can create awareness, and also people can address. So coming to economic policies, whether it be about the zero hunger, about the poverty, about all this, there are, as I say, very good economic instruments, polluter pay principle or extended producer responsibility and so on, already there, which are being practiced in many parts of the world. For example, when we say this shared economy, in the past, unless we have let's say $10,000, I can't own a car. And the public transport was very bad. So now you can see that with this economic incentives, on the one hand, the shared economy, so even if I have a $10, I can order a Grab or the Uber, for example, and I can take a ride. But then, unless if it's a Singapore policies, there's more people pushing their cars in the market. The objective was that cars which are sitting idle, because in my office, I use only 10% of my time, 90% my car would be idle, though I don't have a car, but my point is that way. So in this way, it was supposed to do that, but now it was a new business model. So many people investing into this like a Uber model or like that. But so again, you need economic policies for like Singapore to really control the number of the cars. So there are different policies, and that's also, I think, I would be good for IEEE to create a mapping the policies which are really directly for use of IEEE, as I say that like e-waste policies, for example, per se, or the shared economy, like selling the light, not the bulbs, for example. So there are different ways, but it might be good for you to map. I can help you that there are very good like policies which are really helping even this life cycle assessments and so on. Over.
Thank you for really your nice answer. So even we have to penalize if you are wasting food. So now it's time for our closing remarks and vote of thanks. I cordially invite Professor Takao Onyo, History and Individual Benefit Services Committee Chair of IEEE Region 10, for the closing remarks and voting thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Takao Onyo. I'm currently serving the Region 10 Vice Chair for Technical Activities. First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Mushtaq Ahmed Memon, for providing very informative talk. Today's talk regarding the global environment challenges to achieve SDGs is very crucial to the future of our planet. On the other hand, we need to proceed knowledge economy in our daily life. So win-win situation would be very important. I believe that the contents of Dr. Memon's talk today gave many key thoughts to us. We IEEE community need to utilize our technology to achieve this win-win situation. Then let me propose the board for thanks to Dr. Mushtaq Ahmed Memon for give fantastic talk to Vision 10. I'd like to also thank you, Professor Hatta, for kindly serving the moderator of this talk. The series of Region 10 talk are coordinated as a collaborative initiative for 5 Region 10 committees, and we will continue coordinating a series of seminars on very important topics. So please stay tuned and join us our further talks. Thank you very much for your kind attention and for participating in Region 10 talk today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Just wait for a moment. We want to have a group photograph, please. Please.
Yeah.
Okay.